My perfect revenge. Exposing my fiancé's affair just a week before our dream wedding. I'm 28, and I was eagerly counting down the days to my wedding with my fiancé, Mark, who is 30. We first met in college, but back then, we were just friends. It wasn't until years after graduation, when we randomly ran into each other at a mutual friend's party, that we started talking and eventually became a couple. We had 4 wonderful years together. For context, Mark and I are complete opposites when it comes to relationships. In school, Mark was a notorious ladies' man, a charming guy with a string of romances who left a trail of broken hearts behind him. He liked the image of the bad boy. Even after breaking up, he continued to keep in touch with his exes. My dating life, on the other hand, was much simpler. Before Mark, I only had one serious college boyfriend. When we broke up, I chose to cut all ties with him and never believed in post-breakup friendships. When Mark and I officially started dating, his friends were in shock. He had always been the cool, emotionally distant one, and suddenly, he was building a serious relationship. It seemed like he had flipped a switch and decided to try something real. My own past, dramatic relationship experience made me appreciate the fresh start with Mark even more. Despite his playboy reputation, he seemed genuinely committed to making things work between us. However, there was one major hiccup in our relationship. I remember about 6 months in, a girl messaged me on Instagram. She wanted to tell me something about Mark. I hesitated, but decided to listen. She confessed that Mark had started sending her explicit messages and asked for an intimate photo. I was shocked and immediately confronted him. Despite his attempts to squirm out of it, I kept pressing him. Eventually, he admitted everything, blaming it on alcohol, and begged me to forgive him. It was a real blow to me. I seriously considered ending our relationship right there, but his persistent apologies and tears convinced me to give him a second chance. I just warned him sternly that it could never happen again. After that incident, our 4-year romance was genuinely joyful. We laughed, created memories, and navigated life's challenges together. Mark constantly surprised me with thoughtful gifts and planned romantic dates. Our relationship strengthened, and despite the rough start, we found happiness and harmony. That old story faded into a distant memory, and it truly felt like we were confidently heading toward our happily ever after. 2 months ago, Mark proposed to me while we were on a trip in Africa. It was a moment right out of a romantic movie. Under the African stars, surrounded by the sounds of the wild, he nervously stumbled over his words, professing his love and saying I had changed his entire perspective on relationships. Mark dropped to one knee and, with a trembling hand, pulled out the most beautiful ring I had ever seen. I couldn't hold back my tears of joy and immediately said yes. As the wedding preparations entered the final stretch, my days turned into a whirlwind of excitement and anticipation. I dove headfirst into the joyful hustle, searching for the perfect wedding dress, meticulously compiling the guest list, and choosing the most elegant invitations to make our day truly special. Mark, for his part, was in charge of planning the honeymoon. He seemed genuinely enthusiastic, flipping through travel brochures and sharing his visions for a romantic getaway with me. I had no idea that while I was happily immersed in wedding preparations, something dark was unfolding behind the scenes. The closer the wedding day got, the more I noticed Mark constantly glued to his phone. Sometimes he would smile, but when I asked what was so funny, he'd just say he was watching Instagram Reels. We used to have lovely, engaging dates, but now he seemed lost in his screen, and I felt like I was talking to his phone, not my fiancé. One evening during dinner, I couldn't take it anymore and blurted out, "Mark, what's going on?"
A flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes as if he was hiding something, but he quickly brushed it off, assuring me I was overthinking and needlessly stressing myself out. He made me feel inadequate, like my instincts were wrong. Moreover, Mark claimed I was overanalyzing things and creating problems where none existed. His words left me doubting myself. What if I really am just paranoid? But deep down, the anxiety lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I decided to ignore my suspicions and chalked it all up to the stress of wedding planning and typical pre-wedding jitters.
Yesterday, while Mark was out, I opened his laptop to check our travel itinerary. We were planning to spend our honeymoon in a tropical paradise, a destination that had long been on our bucket list. I was enthusiastically typing in the itinerary to study it at my leisure when I saw a message pop up from a contact named Boss 2. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the chat. On the screen was an explicit photo from a woman I knew too well. Despite Mark disguising her as Boss 2, it was actually his colleague, Martha. I had met her at one of the office parties. Staring at the photo, I was hit by a mix of shock and disbelief. But things got even worse when I started scrolling up the conversation. The messages between Mark and his colleague were filled with declarations of love, mockery of me, and discussions of intimate details of our relationship. Mark was even telling her things about my parents, a topic that is very painful for me. There were numerous explicit photos they had exchanged, and it became clear that their affair had been going on for about a year. It was a heartbreaking realization to see the undeniable proof of Mark's infidelity. The pain was amplified by the fact that Martha herself was married. I knew her husband. Jack is a good man, and I'm sure he has no idea his wife is cheating on him with my fiancé. It was hard to comprehend the heartlessness Mark and Martha displayed. Their secret relationship lasting so long felt like a cruel betrayal. The further I read, the more my hands trembled and my heart constricted. Martha confessed to Mark that the thought of seeing photos from our honeymoon where he would be with someone else made her sick. Mark reassured her, promising he belonged only to her and that the photos meant nothing. She kept asking why he was marrying me, and he flat out stated he was just used to me after all these years. In response, Martha confessed she felt the same way about her husband. She was staying with him because he could give her everything she wanted. They boasted about how cleverly they hid their affair, confident we would never find out. Moreover, they were even planning to meet during our honeymoon. She had somehow convinced her husband to take a vacation to the exact same location we were going. The plan was to casually run into us and then find opportunities to secretly spend time together.
I didn't even notice the tears streaming down my face. The pain was a heavy weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I decided to take screenshots of all their messages over the past year. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, their betrayal echoing in my mind. I just didn't know how to confront him about this. In the evening, Mark called and said he was staying late at work. That call was the final blow, destroying the last remnants of hope in my already broken heart. I lay awake all night in our bed, crushed by emotions, rereading the conversation screenshots over and over. The initial shock gradually gave way to a mixture of fury and sadness. I couldn't understand how Mark could betray our relationship, especially on the eve of our wedding, planning a romantic trip while simultaneously making secret plans with his mistress. It was a cruel twist of fate. I decided I'd had enough and wanted him to feel the same pain I was experiencing. A plan for revenge was born in my mind. A plan to turn the tables on Mark. He returned late that night, and I pretended to be asleep to avoid talking to him. The first thing I did in the morning was find Martha's husband, Jack, on Facebook
and sent him a message asking to meet to discuss something important about his wife. I stressed that absolute caution was needed and that I hoped he wouldn't tell her anything. As I write this post, I'm waiting for his reply. Mark has no idea what I'm preparing for him. He has no clue that I'm about to expose his infidelity to everyone and strip him of the last vestiges of his dignity. I plan to forward the messages between Mark and Martha, excluding the explicit photos, to all his colleagues in the work chat, using his own phone. I'm going to make sure everyone knows why I decided to break up with him. For now, I've chosen to play the role of the naive fiancé, pretending to suspect nothing. So, what do you think? Am I overreacting? Will I be the villain if I expose Mark's affair and ruin Martha's marriage with her husband?
Update 1. Martha's husband, Jack, responded to me on Facebook. I was on edge for several hours, waiting for his reaction. When he asked why I wanted to meet, I lied, saying I was planning a surprise for Martha's birthday. Since everyone knew my fiancé and Martha were close, I hoped he wouldn't catch the lie and would agree to meet. We ended up meeting at a cafe near his work. As soon as we sat down with our coffees, he immediately said I was lying because Martha's birthday wasn't for a while. I gave an awkward smile and admitted I had lied, but that it was important for him to talk. It was about my fiancé and his wife. His brows furrowed in confusion. That's when I took out my phone and showed him all the screenshots I had taken from Mark's laptop. He scrolled through them and was just as stunned as I was. I explained everything, revealing the truth about Mark and Martha's affair. Jack's jaw tensed, and he just shook his head in disbelief. He asked, "How long have you known about this?" And I told him I had only found out last night. I saw pain in his eyes, as if he couldn't believe his wife was capable of such a thing. I asked Jack about their upcoming trip, and he looked at me in surprise. Then I laid it all out for him, that my fiancé and Martha had planned everything so we would end up in the same place, pretending to casually run into each other, when in reality they were setting up a secret rendezvous. Jack was even more stunned. His face literally changed right before my eyes. I felt he was experiencing the same emotional storm I was, and I felt sorry for both of us. He looked up at me and confessed he never imagined Martha was capable of pulling something like this behind his back. And then Jack dropped a bomb. They had been trying to have a baby and were planning to move into a bigger house and start a new life. He said he had noticed small shifts in her mood and behavior, but had chalked it all up to work stress since she often stayed late. I opened up to Jack and told him Mark had been behaving the same way for a long time, constantly on his phone, and whenever I voiced suspicion, he would manipulate and gaslight me. Jack asked what I planned to do with the evidence. I honestly laid out my plan, explaining that it involved his wife too. I told him I could leave Martha out of it if he was against it, but Jack surprised me. He shook his head and said that Martha had betrayed me too, by getting involved with my fiancé, so I had every right to expose the truth. I agreed and asked what he was going to do. He said that after what he had seen, he no longer saw a future with Martha. He had always wanted a family, but after her betrayal, he didn't want her to be the mother of his children. It was obvious he was preparing for a divorce.
Jack asked me to airdrop all the screenshots to him so he could show them to his lawyer. Before leaving, we exchanged numbers. Jack warned me I should break up with my fiancé first before revealing his dirty secret, in case he became aggressive. I assured him that was exactly what I planned to do. Tomorrow, while Mark is at work, I plan to quietly move out of our house so he returns to an empty home. I have a busy few days ahead of me executing the plan.
Update 2. I know it's been a few weeks since my last update, and I want to assure everyone I'm fine and I feel good. Everything went exactly as I had planned. First, I moved out of our house while Mark was at work. I asked my brothers to help, and we quickly moved my things to my parents' place. Everyone already knew about the situation and fully supported me. I thought about leaving Mark a note with an explanation, but ultimately decided to leave without a word. I wanted him to feel the emptiness of my absence, tossing and turning at night and racking his brain about why I left. I left the engagement ring on his dining table. I wanted nothing to do with him anymore. I deleted all our photos from social media and blocked him everywhere. My parents comforted me, reminding me it was better to know the truth before the wedding than to suffer later. Their words resonated with me, and I found solace in them. Difficult as it was, the truth now is a chance for the future. As expected, Mark bombarded my parents with calls and messages, trying to find out where I was. I imagined him coming home, seeing the empty closets and the ring on the table. He begged my parents to give him a chance to explain everything, but my parents, always protective of me, stood as a wall and didn't let him near me. They made it clear that nothing could change the situation now. My father, with firm resolve, expressed his disappointment and ordered Mark to never show his face near them again. Imagining Mark panicking, as he had always been intimidated by my tall, ex-military father, I couldn't help but smile. After my father's stern warning, Mark stopped all attempts to contact me. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of his problems. I knew Mark rarely used his home laptop, so I cleverly set up a mass email delay. The next day, an email was sent from his work account to all employees, exposing his year-long affair with Martha. Attached to the email were screenshots of their private messages where they mocked colleagues and their boss. This made everything even spicier. That's how I decided to flip the script and reveal the truth. As planned, the email went out at the appointed time and completely turned Mark's life upside down. He was surely shocked when he realized I had uncovered his secret. The truth, dumped in that email, was a blow he didn't expect. His colleagues, opening the email and seeing the screenshots, were also stunned and couldn't believe their eyes. One of his colleagues, Sarah, who had been my friend on Facebook for a long time, reached out herself to check on me. She told me that the explicit content of their messages, especially the mockery of colleagues and their boss, made everyone question Mark's character. When his boss learned the extent of the indecent conversations about her, she was naturally furious. This wasn't just a private betrayal, but a professional scandal that rocked the entire office. In desperation and rage, Mark tried to reach out to my parents again, but it was already too late. The email was sent from his own laptop, so he didn't have a shred of evidence that I had done it. Everything he and Martha had said about their colleagues was now turned against him. The news spread like wildfire, and the consequences for his career were catastrophic. In the following days, Sarah kept me updated, telling me Mark was under the full brunt of his boss's anger. A real office boycott began. Colleagues turned away from him. Mark and Martha were isolated after their affair was exposed. The final blow came from the boss. Deeming their actions professional misconduct, she fired both of them. I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of satisfaction and pity upon learning of the consequences that had befallen him. Meanwhile, Jack also wrote to me. He told me Martha was furious and raging at me for revealing their secret, but in response, he presented her with a gift: divorce papers. That must have been a shock for her, especially following the work scandal she hadn't even recovered from yet. In her rage and confusion, she tried to reach out to Jack, demanding an explanation and a chance to save their marriage. But Jack remained steadfast. Now that the truth is finally out, I feel a newfound sense of lightness and self-assurance. But despite this relief, there are days when it's incredibly hard. Sometimes I sit in the bathroom and cry for hours, processing the full weight of the breakup with Mark. It's a process.
a mix of healing and confronting the pain. But honesty has become an anchor for me, helping me hold on and navigate this storm of emotions.
Update 3. 3 months have passed since my last update, and I want to express my gratitude to everyone who sent me words of support during this difficult time. Although I can't reply to everyone, know that I read all your messages and your support means a lot to me. To deal with the aftermath of the breakup with Mark, I started going to therapy. It has become an important tool that helps me sort through complex emotions and find a path to healing. Every day brings new challenges, but talking to a therapist has been a therapeutic process and a crucial part of my journey forward. I did eventually meet with Mark when he came to my parents' house, begging for a chance to explain everything. I reluctantly let him in to avoid causing a scene in front of the neighbors. Mark started making excuses, claiming he cheated due to emotional vulnerability and that Martha had seduced him and he had resisted as much as he could. He was shocked to learn that I knew everything and asked why I hadn't exposed him earlier. I replied that it was audacious to expect me to be patient while he was having fun with his colleague. I made it clear that I didn't need his explanations because I no longer wanted to be with him. Everything he said no longer mattered. I had no interest in listening to his justifications. Mark was about to continue, but I cut him off. I don't want to hear anything more. Mark looked stunned, perhaps expecting a different outcome. He tried to persuade me to change my mind and reminded me of the 4 years we spent together. But I stood my ground. I will never be able to trust him again. He confessed he hated returning to an empty house and was planning to move back to his hometown after losing his job. For a moment, I felt a slight pity, but then immediately reminded myself that this was all the result of his own actions. He tried to prolong the conversation, but I sharply put an end to it. I'm done. I don't want any more conversations or news about your life. When he realized I wouldn't budge, he left. I closed the door behind him, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. This conversation was closure for us. I'm glad he hasn't tried to contact me again. Besides therapy, I am actively looking for a new job. My goal is to achieve financial independence so I can move out of my parents' place and live on my own. I am grateful to my family for their unconditional support. My brothers regularly visit me on weekends to make sure I'm holding up. Living with my parents has been a positive change for me. This difficult experience has become a catalyst for self-discovery and strengthening my inner resilience. Well, that's it. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. Watch our previous videos, which you will see right here. And be sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Good luck.